Thank you so much, Tirta and Guste. Those spaces in between, the secretly quiet spaces where I find a pause to breathe. The crevices and nooks, the corners and edges of gaps and silences find importance amongst themselves because nobody gives rise to or glances up from the importantly important things. But in those spaces, those pauses between the stuff that we call life, is where I find myself a little more, and I can sigh out a little longer, and I can see a little clearer, and I can begin to finally understand. Let's seek out the spaces in between and pause and breathe together and start to knit together all of the moments of the stuff that we call life. I think some of you see me in this position before. I'm going to invite you all to find a comfortable seated position, whatever that might look like for you. If you feel comfortable, I'm going to invite you to close your eyes. If you don't, just take a moment to look down. I now invite you to listen to the sounds that you can hear. I invite you to bring your awareness to your breath. I invite you to inhale through your nose, exhale through your mouth. I invite you to deepen your exhale. Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. Deepening the exhale. Perhaps it's 2 counts on the inhale and 3 or 4 counts on the exhale. Notice what you notice. Become aware of this process. Exhale longer than the inhale. Notice, because what you are doing right now is regulating your nervous system. You are literally taking yourself via your nervous system to a place of connection and calm, just with your breath. I now invite you to open your eyes. Notice what you notice. When you think of the word school, what do you see? When you think of the word curriculum, what do you feel? I used to see buildings and lines and uniforms and exams and achievement and stress and pages of words and indexes of numbers. I could feel pressure and intensity, anxiety, and at times a feeling of loss. I could also see camps and walks in the rain where leeches craning from the edges of leaves would try and bite through our laughter. And moments where teachers would lay down their papers and talk as if human, and of big trees and gossip and great grades and secrets and poor grades and tears shed behind bathroom cubicle doors and bus rides from sports carnivals and theatre performances, exhausted and thrilled. I could also feel creativity, connection, meaning, joy. I began my teaching career 17 years ago as a teacher of literature, one of the most, I believe, revered or feared subjects in the curriculum. It's definitely the one parents ask about most next to math. I chose to teach literature because I had been changed by my English teachers, by the way they spoke, by their opinions, by their beliefs, their passions. I loved English because it wasn't necessarily that there was a right or a wrong. We got to analyse life through myriad character perspectives. We began to understand life. Now, to understand life, wouldn't that be wonderful? Lessons in understanding life don't necessarily fit into the curriculum. They're too fuzzy for all the clearly and definitely shaped holes and objectives the curriculum fits into. But as I grew more into the teacher that I once hoped I could be, I realised that there is a curriculum, a values-based curriculum in the in-between, in the spaces between classes like math and literacy and science, in the conversation between lessons, in the pauses on the staircases, in the arguments and the tears, in the accusations and apologies, in the owning up, in the standing up, in the finding one's breath over and over again. Over the past 2 years, as I completed my Masters of Counselling and my certificates in mind-based and body-based breathwork, I became more aware, and the layers of the school experience began to peel away, revealing themselves more clearly. I was humbled by what I witnessed in the spaces between classes. As I sat longer with students and I listened more deeply to their stories, as I validated their feelings, and I guided them in mindfulness and being with their breath. This is where I saw students accessing their values, understanding their beliefs and owning their perspectives of the world, and I began to wonder, how can we teach all this content before we've taught our students to know themselves, to know their values? And then, of course, how on earth do we teach them to know all of that? When I interviewed for Green School, I was asked, what does being green mean to you? I felt intimidated by this question. I remember feeling flooded with anxiety. What if I'm not green enough to be hired at this school? I have chickens. I recycle. Is that enough? These thoughts raced across my mind, quickening my heartbeat, quickening my breath. And so I paused, I took a breath, and I made a choice to speak from my heart. I said, I believe being green is about self-awareness. If we can teach children how to become aware of their thoughts and feelings and teach them that their responses are choices, then we equip them with a tool to look outwards to the world. With this tool, they will have the opportunity to notice how their thoughts, feelings, and actions impact others and the world around them, the environment. How can we cultivate a culture of care for our planet if we don't first cultivate a culture of self-awareness? Guiding students towards self-awareness and listening to that inner voice has become my green mission for the past 8 years. Values-based learning is the idea that we can teach values within a curriculum by modelling through explicit activities, through understanding ourselves, each other, and the world. Values-based education is something that progressive schools need to be doing, and Dr. Neil, founder of Value-Based Schools Education, said, our world is so desperately needs help. Values-based education is bringing this hope. By creating a transformational movement that has the potential to transform education and society so that we can live in peace and harmony with each other, ensuring the sustainability of the planet. Everyone wants to be teaching values, and at Green School we have an entire acronym to define them, the I Respect. We say we teach values and we certainly understand collectively their importance, but how do you do it? Well, I can give you a few pointers on how not to do it. In an article titled How to Not Teach Values, Cohn states, extrinsic motivation, in other words, is not only entirely different from intrinsic motivation, but actually tends to erode it. Handing out certificates using wall charts can be good for some and not great for most. Some students become so overwhelmed by extrinsic motivation, in my opinion, I've seen them simply check out. The article goes on to discuss that in a series of studies showing individuals who've been rewarded for doing something nice become less likely to think of themselves as caring or helpful people, and more likely to attribute their behaviour to the reward. Teaching someone to have integrity or responsibility or to demonstrate empathy is something that can come from others modelling these behaviours. But unless an individual cares, connects, or finds meaning in something, these values become superfluous, obsolete. I'd like to posit the idea that each of our I respect values, when drilled down, are about connection, purpose, and meaning. So if we want our students to live these values, we need to find a way to connect to this purpose and meaning. I'm going to take you on a little journey to demonstrate how I believe values-based learning can be accessed and integrated through the nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is a phenomenal part of our physiology. It largely controls our bodily functions. It's also responsible for our survival. You might be aware of the two parts of this system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Stephen Porter's polyvagal theory, a concept I discovered through studying breathwork and counselling, and integrated through listening to a wonderful book called Befriending Your Nervous System by Deb Dana, an internal family systems therapist, describes this theory as the science of connection. And she describes the three paths within the autonomic nervous system connected by our wandering vagus nerve. These three paths are sympathetic response or fight, flight, action, dorsal response or collapse, disconnect, shut down, and ventral response, connection, experiencing being in the world in a safe way. Porges calls this third path the social engagement system, a playful mixture of activation and calming that operates out of unique nerve influence. In 17 years of education, I've seen a diversity of learners and learning styles, and I can't help but create an analogy, as all good literature teachers tend to do, from learning about polyvagal theory and how its representation might be in the educational model. The sympathetic response could be our achievement subjects, literacy, math, science, history, switched on to perform, to compete, to feel a sense of stress and pressure. Our dorsal response is a shutdown, perhaps a disengagement from learning, perhaps due to overwhelm, to unresolved personal issues, to unidentified learning needs. And our ventral response is that sense of being in flow, of connecting with others, finding meaning in what I am doing and why I am doing it. Dana says your biology shapes your experiences. She teaches her clients to put their problems on a shelf before and when they have learnt to track, befriend, and regulate their nervous system. Then she asks them to bring back the problem and look at the problem again through autonomic regulation, to come back to a place that makes them feel safe enough to explore possibilities. Very interesting to me was discovering in an article from Counselling Today that the social engagement system helps us navigate relationships, and that by helping people shift into their use of the social engagement system, it allows them to become more flexible in their coping styles. We need to be able to switch in and out of these three different pathways: activation, deactivation, connection. We can only do this really well if we go back and forth through our ventral state. To access our ventral state requires a feeling of safety and support. And it's through accessing this ventral state of being connected and finding creativity, meaning, and purpose that I believe is where we can integrate values-based learning, and thus all of those lessons about life. Dana discusses how we can directly access the ventral vagal state through our breath, and Rumi sums it up so beautifully. There is one way of breathing that is shameful and constricted. Then there is another way, a breath of love that takes you all the way to infinity. Dana reiterates, our breath is a direct pathway to our autonomic nervous system. Breath is both automatic and it can be manipulated to change the way we think, feel, and perceive. Let's try it now. Okay, so once again, I think you guys have all got this. I'm going to ask you to find a comfortable seated position, whatever that looks like for you. And I invite you to close your eyes. Once again, I invite you to connect with your breath. Notice what you notice. Notice where you are right now. Beginning now to extend your exhale, allowing it to become longer than your inhale. I invite you to place a hand in the center of your chest and your heart space. And as you continue to extend your exhale longer than you inhale, I invite you to send some loving kindness to yourself, whatever that looks like for you. As you extend your exhale, you are signaling to your brain that you are safe enough that you don't need to run and hide. As you extend your exhale, you are signaling to your brain that you are safe enough to sigh out. Try that now. Take a deep inhale and sigh out. Notice what you notice as you're allowing yourself direct access to your ventral vagal state. I invite you to drop your hand down to your lap, slowly open your eyes and just take a moment to notice what you notice. My students notice that they feel calm, sleepy, relaxed, content after they've practiced a breathing exercise. They also express awe when they realize that they have the power to change the way they can feel in their body, mind, and emotions. "That's so cool," one student recently exclaimed. Breathing practice changes our blood chemistry, and if used intentionally, it has a direct impact on reducing stress hormones. This is a tool we all hold within us. James Nestor, in his book, Breath, says, "Change the way you breathe, and you change the way you see the world." I believe if we can teach students to change the way they breathe and connect with their breath, they can change the way they learn. One of my favourite quotes comes from Viktor Frankl, Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, philosopher, and Holocaust survivor. "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom." What began as something that happened in the margins, values-based learning has turned into something that I believe needs to be the central focus of all learning. That is, connecting to ourselves so that we can connect with others, so that we can connect with the world around us. By accessing our ventral vagal state, we can activate in a safe and supportive place, engaging and integrating with values, personal and collective, finding meaning in all types of learning. Over my time at Green School, I've introduced students to many spaces in between the main curriculum, to social emotional learning, yoga nidra, breathing techniques, co-developing a school-wide mindfulness program via the Mindful Schools curriculum. These practices sat at the edges of other subjects mostly, took up the space when a teacher was absent, used when the deluge of rain over our wall-less classrooms was just too loud. They filled in the gaps of the other, taking up as little space as possible, trying so hard to be unseen, until we began to notice their effects. Students began to fall into a habit quite easily of finding their mindful bodies, of seeking a silence before a busy lesson. Schools around the world introducing mindfulness into their curriculum noticed a significant reduction in absences and a significant increase in positive student behaviour. Green School then went on to teach the teachers how to lead mindfulness. We carved out mindfulness into our timetable. We introduced a mindful gong. I thought this was going to be met with the most resistance. 2 days. It took 2 days before we noticed students across the campus stopping to observe, to take a breath, to pause. They would even shush innocent visitors mid-presentation. Shh, it's the mindfulness gong. A fierce whisper would often word, and the space would become silent as we all collectively took a breath, and in our exhale changed, for a moment, the way we saw the world around us. Mindfulness asks that we become present with what is going on around us. Becoming aware of our breath asks us to become aware of what's keeping us alive and present, and to find a space of calm from a place of activation. In social emotional learning, one of the most remarkable outcomes I have seen from the topics we cover around relationship and peer pressure is the empowering idea that we all have choices, and teaching students that in each moment we are confronted with choices, some far more challenging than others, and that relationships can become pressure cookers in which sometimes we might feel we don't have a choice. When students realise that they have the ability to pause, take a breath, reflect before they speak or act, it has had profound effects. The Gottman Institute research discovered that couples, when facilitated in conflict, were given 20 minutes to have a break, to reframe, to downshift, to reflect, to pause. Invariably, they would come back together with a deeper level of respect, greater kindness, and deeper empathy for each other. I've been asked more times than I can ever count, can we please practice Yoga Nidra today? Can we just lie down and breathe? Our collective nervous system wants to pause, to reconnect. As Edward J. Brantmeyer said, slowing down is a revolutionary act. Interestingly, over the past year, I've found that asking my students to sit and breathe has been met with more positive response than asking them to sit and do mindfulness. And I wonder if it's the simple act of a function that we do every single day makes it more accessible, less rigid. This does not mean that all students want to sit and pause. This does not mean for one instance that I have not been met with a resounding no, eye rolls, head flat on desks. I have. But if we continue to bring it in as a tool and offer it within their awareness, just by knowing this, I believe it nurtures their awareness of self and of others. Students have come up to me over the years and told me how they took a break from a friendship or laid down a boundary in a challenging relationship, how they were able to finally say thank you and no. When students share these pivotal moments with me, Frankl's quote always sounds in my mind. In our response lies our growth and freedom. From these in-between curricula, students can learn to breathe, to pause, to connect and to choose how they, from their inner awareness, how they choose to respond. And in those responses, they can grow into the people they are meant to be. If most of our lives revolve around relationships, and if accessing our ventral vagal state allows us to connect and navigate relationships, then why wouldn't we begin to see how imperative this curriculum is? Let's bring the curriculum of the in-between out from and see our values being lived by the students we teach. What am I taking away as I move into my next chapter? That I still love literature. And that there is a curriculum that needs just as much or more attention. That I've learned from my students that taking a simple breath is an entry point for discovering self-awareness. That taking a pause is a revolutionary concept. Imagine if students around the world heard the words, let's all take a few conscious breaths. After they heard the words, please take your seats. And before they heard, please take out your books. What am I leaving behind? I have the deepest of gratitude to Green School for being a school that's opened itself up to the spaces in between, to valuing the whole child and to holding a desire to continue to explore what values-based learning actually is. I hope that Green School continues to value the content that is often lay in the in-between, the content that allows students to feel safe and secure and engaged, so that they can walk the I Respect values because those values are relevant and meaningful. I envision a world that has the courage to reframe the educational narrative and that collectively we can begin together equally to knit together all of the moments that make up the lessons that we call life. Thank you.